Hello, everyone. Welcome to Compound 50 Introduction to Programming. This is our lecture 2. Here's the plan for today. We'll continue talking about Python today. Okay, so we're learning Python in this course. And here are the topics we will cover. We'll talk about operations on ints. That's something we started last time and we'll continue this time. We'll talk a bit about operations on strings, and we'll talk about lists. List will be a new topic that we'll learn today. We'll also talk about loops and conditions. And I should say these are super important topics. You should really practice these a lot. I will give you some practice problems in the end that you should try them. But basically everything we see today, I will post the code, but you should write it on your own. You should run it. You should debug it. So please make sure you do that. Okay, so this the plan for today is basically write a lot of code. Okay, so we're going to we'll go to PyCharm. So this is where we're going. This is our project from lecture 1. And what I would like to do is to create a new project for today's lecture, for lecture 2. So I go to new project. The name of the project will be lecture 2. Create. Let's say this window. Okay, and we created a new project. So when we create a new project, remember there's a file main.py. I'm going to use different names of files. So for example, here, I would like to use, for example, testing ints. And this one I'm going to just delete. Okay, so here's what I would like to do. Here's what I would like to do now. For now, let's get 2 ints from the user, and let's call whatever we get input. Let's just call them x and y. Okay, and then we'll print x, and then we'll print y just to see what we're getting. Okay, so if you remember, whatever we put in quotation marks, we just print it as is, so x is equal to, and then plus we append it with this variable x, that's right here, and it should print x equal whatever number we put here, and y will be printed whatever number we put there. And then we'll go to run, testing ints, and okay, so let's try to print 10, and y will be, I don't know, 5, for example. So it prints x equals 10, y equals 5. Okay. And here is what I would like to do with these numbers. I would like to compute their sum. I would like to compute their product. I would like to compute maybe for the difference, x minus y. And I would like to divide x by y. Okay? And I would like to print all these. So I will print sum is equal to sum. Let's only do the first one. We'll see if it works. Okay, and if I run it, I don't know, x equals 7, y equals 3. It says sum is equal to 72. Something is wrong. So what's wrong here? So what's wrong here is the following. If we look at the type, remember last time we if we look at the type of x, then we'll see that the type of x is a string. So we need to first cast it into an int, right? So here's how we'll do it. We'll rename the original inputs to be the original strings to be x, input x and input y, and then we'll convert it into a number. Okay, so what this does is it converts, or the proper word is casts, input x into an int. And now these will be treated into, and now these will be treated as numbers. And then there is one small thing we need to change here. So remember, when we want to concatenate two strings, we can do it with strings. We cannot do it with string and int. So remember to cast when adding two strings. Right, alternatively, we could write print x is equal to just input x. Okay, because input x is a string. Okay, so we have for now two types of variables. We have input x, which is a string, and this is an int. And let's go at 7, y is 2. No, something is still wrong. So what's wrong here? We need to do the same thing here. All right, now sum is 9. This is amazing. Okay, so we computed the sum of two numbers. Now let's do the same with the difference. X minus y, and product will be x times y, and division will be x divided by y. Okay, and then we'll print product is product. And I'll do so difference will be the difference, and division, result of the division will be the result of the division. And let's try to print all four of these. Let's see what happens. I don't know, let's say x is 7 and y is 2. Okay, so we get sum is 9, difference is 5, product is 14, so it's 7 times 2, and division is 3.5. So I see I printed x twice. Let me also print y. Okay, so this is our small program that gets two numbers, maybe 13 and 4, and computes the sum, the difference, the product, and the result of the division. Okay, that's the first kind of simple example. Here's the next thing I would like to do. I would like to do integer division. So what do I mean by integer division? I would like to divide x by y, but not get a real number, but get a quotient and a remainder. So here's how to do that. And let me do it just inline. I'm going to print is, so the quotient of the division of x by y is equal to, okay, so whatever I'll do, I'll divide into strings. I don't use divide, but rather I use double divide. Okay, so it's this double slash sign. And double slash gives the quotient of the division. And if I want the remainder, for the remainder, I use the percentage. Let's try to run this code. So I don't know, maybe we'll divide 13 by 5. So the quotient, when 13 is divided by 5, the quotient is 2 and the remainder is 3. Right, 13 divided by 5, the quotient is 2 and the remainder is 3. Yeah, so we got here. Okay, so one thing about PyCharm is it sort of sometimes complains about, I put 2 empty spaces. First of all, please write nice code. But even if you don't write very nice code, you can go to code and then click reformat, and it will beautify everything. So your code should really look beautiful. It puts the right spaces, even if I somehow, write spaces that are not very nice. I go to reformat, or I do Control Alt L, and it will make everything look nice. Okay. So that's our example with testing ints. Okay, so now we know how to do addition, multiplication, divide, and we also know how to do integer division. Okay. Okay, what else? Here, let me show you one small trick. So if you put /n inside print, it will jump one line down. So now there will be a one line in the output here. Let's try it. 672. Oh, the /n, it's somehow a code for a new line. Okay, so here it added a new line. So it's something we should remember. Let me try a couple of more examples related to manipulating ints. So here is one more example. Here's what I would like to do. I want to check which of the two numbers is larger. Here's how I do it. We write an if statement. If x is greater or equal to y, and we put a colon. And on the next line, we need to do indentation. So indentation means, I jump, I think 4 spaces, but you can do a tab button. So note the indentation. So we're going to print that x is greater or equal to y. And if not, so what does it mean? Else means the first condition doesn't hold. If that's not true, then x is smaller than y. Let's try to, and note the indentation in the body of the if statement, in the body of the else statement. All right, so let's say 7 and, I don't know, 13. It will print x is smaller than y, because 7 is smaller than 13. Okay. And if the two numbers are equal, for example, I don't know, 12 and 12, x is greater or equal than, to y because, well, x is equal to y, right? So greater equal means if they're equal, then the first condition will hold. Okay. But let's say I want to be let me put the indentation here. Let's say I want to be more precise. I want to check if x is equal to y or greater than y or smaller than y. Here is how I do that. So I'll say if x is greater than y, then print x is greater than y. I will not write else, I will write elif. So elif corresponds to else, otherwise if the first condition doesn't hold. If x is smaller than y, then we'll print x is smaller than y. And I forgot the colon. And what are the other options? So what does it mean else here? Else here means that x must be equal to y, right? So these are just comments, but I write it for myself so that it's clear what's going on. Okay, so now we have three conditions and not two, and here we print x is equal to y. And actually, let's try to debug specifically this part. Which one will we choose? Let's say x will be smaller than y. Okay, so x will be -3 and y will be 8. And I'll put the debugger. -3, y will be 10. Okay, when we reach this line, what happens? So we first check if x is greater than y. No, x is not greater than y. Something didn't work here. Let me try it again. Let's say x is 2, y is 10. Yes. What are you printing? So it prints x is smaller than y, but for some reason it goes here. I don't know. The debugging didn't work for some reason. Oh well, it happens sometimes. But it does print that x is smaller than y in both cases, okay? Both in this case and in this case. So it works correctly, but somehow the debugger doesn't seem to work. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, I'll give up on it then. Okay. So a few comments. There can be several elif, there can be more than one, but we cannot put elif after else. Else is the last condition. Okay, so else will always be the last condition. Okay, this is our first example. This was about testing ints. Here is what I would like to do next. So for now we talked about lists. For now we talked about ints. Learn about operations on ints and learn about if else. Okay. So here is our next topic. And we'll talk about this. Okay. So what's a list? Um, so let's say we have a list of groceries. Okay, so here is how we're I don't want, so lists are useful when we want to have a collection of things and not only one. So not only one number, not only one string, but maybe you want a collection of items. For example, I don't know, I have a list of groceries like maybe milk and cheese and bread and maybe potatoes. I don't know, olive oil. Okay, let's say this is our list. So let's try to print it. So it's possible to print the entire list, not only one string, but sort of to print the entire list. Here's what happens. We print the entire list. And if we want the print to be nicer, maybe we'll do something like this. The list of groceries is, remember a space, make it colon. So what doesn't work? What doesn't work, groceries of type list, and we can only concatenate strings, so we need to cast it, right? So I will put it again. Remember to cast into str for printing. And we'll run it now. Oh, the list of groceries is, and it gives us the list. Okay. And what uh, one of the basic things we want to do in the list is, for example, to iterate over each item in the list. So, for example, one way to do it is to say for item in groceries, and you'll see exactly what it does. Print item. And what we're doing here, so what the for loop does, so this is called the for loop, iterates over all items in the list. So item is our variable, and whatever we put the name here, we should also use the same name within the body of the for loop. And here I should write, notice the indentation in the body of the loop. What will happen here is we will print each item one by one. Okay, so it prints milk and cheese and bread and apple and potato and olive oil. And let me try to debug this part. Maybe this will be more successful. I print the first item and the next item, and now item becomes bread, and item becomes apples, and so on. So we go over all items one by one. Good, good. We can also access a particular item in the list. Okay. So for example, we can say, so the items in the list have indices. The items in the list are indexed from 0 up to, well, length minus 1. Okay, so it's 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. For example, if we print groceries in position 0, this will print milk. Okay. Or groceries in position 3 will print 0, 1, 2, 3 apples. Let's try it. Let me actually in index 0 is, and groceries in index 3. Okay, let's try to run it and we'll see what happens. When we run it in position 0, it gives milk. And in position 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, it gives apples. Okay. So we have these. Okay, so this is our first example of using the list. Let's try a few more examples. So maybe we'll call it list of numbers. And now we'll have numbers. Maybe these numbers represent grades. And maybe these are grades in a course or something. I don't know. Sometimes you get 100. You're going to have a streak of 100s, and then you get 80. And then you get 95, and then 70, and then again 100. So how many grades do we have? 9. Yeah, sure. Let's give another 100. Okay. So if we print grades, this will simply print the list of all grades. So I do run, list of numbers, and it prints the grades. Okay. Let's try to compute some simple operations on this. For example, computing the maximal grade. Okay, so how will we compute the maximal grade? Here is an idea. We will have a variable. Yeah. So what we're doing here, I'll write in the comments here, maximum of A in a list. Okay, so we will have a variable called max or max grade. And in the beginning, we'll tell the max grade will be just grade in position 0. Or I don't know, maybe we'll just put it to be 0. And here's what we do. We'll say for grade in grades. Okay, so we take one grade. And what do we want? So we go over the grades one by one. We take 98 and then 70 and then 100 and then 100 again. And then we'll ask the following question. If the grade is more than the maximum, then maximum becomes the new grade. Okay, so here is the logic here. If the new grade we see is more than max so far, we'll update max. Oh, it's called max grade. Sorry. Okay. And then in the end, we'll print nicely. The maximal grade is, okay. Let's try to run it. It says maximal grade 100, but I think here debugging would be very instructive. Okay, so for now, max grade is just 0, and we're going over the numbers one by one. Okay, so here are all the grades, and here's the maximal grade. So now grade is 98, right? We take the first grade, 98. Is it more than max grade? Is it more than 0? Yes. If it's more than 0, okay, we go into the if condition, and we update the max grade to be 98. We go to the next grade. The next grade is 70. Is 70 more than the maximal grade? No. If so, we skip the if statement. What's the next grade? The next grade is this 100. Is it more than the maximum? So the maximum so far was 98. Now it's 100. So we want to update the maximum. Oh, now it became 100. Okay, and then 100 again, and 100 again, and 80, and 95. We go over all the grades one by one. And in the end, we print the maximal grade, and the maximal grade is 100. Okay, so that's our sort of simple but nice example. Okay, let's try another example. You know, for when having list of grades, we'll compute the average. We usually like to compute the average. So let's compute the average grade. The average grade. So we'll call it average. We'll start with 0, and here's how we compute the average. We will first compute the sum of all grades, and then divide the sum by the number of grades. How do we compute the sum? So we start with sum equals 0, and we do something very similar, right? So we do for grade in grades. Sum is equal to sum plus the new grade. Right, so we increment the sum by the new grade in each iteration. And then we'll say that the average is equal to sum divided by. So here's another function I'm going to introduce, length of grades. Okay, so length returns the length of the list. And then we're going to print the average grade is average. Let's try to run this one. The average is 91.3. But again, let's try to debug this, because debugging is, I think, more important than actually running it. Okay, so for now, sum is 0. And here is our list. So first we have 98. So sum becomes 98. The next grade is 70. So we'll add 98 to 70 and we'll get, well, 168. And next grade is 100. So it becomes 268 and 368 and so on. We go over all grades, we sum them all up. Okay, when we exit, the sum is 913, and we need to divide it by the length. So what's the length? The length is 10. When we divide it, yeah, we got the result, 91.3. This is how you compute the average. Okay, so now we can compute the average, we can compute the sum. Let me try a third example. And the third example will be count 100s in the list. In the list of grades. Okay. So to count how many 100s we'll have a variable called count 100. So it will be initialize it to 0. And then we'll do again. We'll do the for loop for grade in grades. What do we do? If grade is equal to 100, then we're going to increment the count by 1. So this is the same as count 100 is equal to count 100 plus 1. Okay, so increase count 100 by 1. And in the end, we're going to print the number of 100s is equal to count 100. Okay, so we have this variable 100. Declare the counter and initialize it to 0. Then we go over the grades one by one. And let's try to debug this one. So here's count 100. In the beginning, count 100 is 0. And then we go over the grades one by one. So the first grade is 98. Right here, 98. So the count did increase. The second grade is 70. So the count did increase. The third grade is 100. So the count becomes 1. The next grade is also 100. So the count becomes 2. The next grade is also 100. So the count becomes 3. The next grade is 80. So count doesn't change. The next grade is 95. Right? It's not 100, so the count doesn't change. And then 70 doesn't change. The next one is 100. So we go into the body of the if statement. And we increment the count. And then we increment the count for the last one. And that's it. These are all the grades. And then we print the result to console. So the number of 100 is equal to 5. Okay, and one thing I should emphasize again, notice the indentations. It's super important. So we have two indentations here. So one is, well, this is the body of the for loop. And this is the body of the if statement. Maybe I'll even put it inside. This is the body of the for loop of the if, which is inside. Okay. This was our first or second example involving lists. Okay, so now we have lists of numbers and we saw 3 examples. The number of 100s in the list. Okay, so that's what we have so far. While we are here, let me show you another nice example. Maybe I'll call it new. Okay, we'll create another file. Will be called use random. And here is what I would like to do. So I'll have a list of fruits. Okay, and choosing a random fruit. So here's how we choose a random fruit. Let's say I want to choose I'm not sure which one I want. Let's choose a random one. So here's how we choose a random one. First of all, we import a package called random. So import a package means there is somewhere there code that's called random. It's part of the standard Python. And once I write this import, I can actually use it. Here is how I use it. I type random dot choice, and in parentheses, I will give the list, and I will return it into a random fruit. Random fruit. And then I'm going to print this. Okay. Let's try to run it. So my random fruit is mango. This is what comes out. But if I run it again, it will become orange. And if I run it again, it becomes cherry. So it just gives me a random item from the list. So let me say it chooses a random item from the list. Importing the library that has random. So this is how we import this. How do we know all these libraries? Well, we'll learn them one by one. I mean, we'll probably not learn all of them, but we'll learn some of them. You know what? How about if we're already here? Let's try another fruit. Okay. My second random fruit is a random fruit. And notice what I do here is I use the same variable. So the previous random fruit is forgotten. Okay, so I choose a random fruit from the list of fruits and I put it into the same variable random fruit. And here's what happens. So my first fruit is mango and the second fruit is also mango. But that's kind of a coincidence. Okay, so first will be banana and second will be cherry. Or here it's orange and apple. Sure, sometimes they will be the same, right? We have 6 different fruits. So maybe 1 out of 6, they will be equal. Yeah, we have cherry and cherry, but usually they will be different. Okay, but I would like, let's have a small break between the two fruits. Here's how we do it. We'll have another library called time. And we'll do something like time.sleep. Let's say 1 second. For 1 second. And how about then we print a dot. And then, I don't know, we'll print 3 dots one by one. Dot, dot, dot. Let's sleep also after the third dot. So we print and then dot, wait 1 second, dot, wait 1 second. And then my second random fruit. So the code here is you print your first fruit, then you sleep 1 second, print dot, print 1 second, print dot, print 1 second, print dot, and then wait, and then you choose another random fruit. Okay, that's another kind of silly example, but I don't know. Oh, and if I wanted all these dots to be in the same line, here's what I can do. I can use this end command. Okay, so this end argument. So what it does, it says, don't jump to the next line. And here, maybe in the end, do jump to the next line. So end here says, what do I want to put after the end of the state, after the end of what's written in the string? right? And remember, the default is it jumps to the next line, but it doesn't have to be. Right, so if I put XYZ, it will print XYZ after the end of the string. Let's try it again. Dot, dot, dot. You see, it doesn't jump to the next line. This is nice. So that's another silly example. And for this, so time is the library used to pause our program. Okay. So it says sleep for 1 second. Kind of silly example, but I don't know. I think we're already here, so why not? Okay, so, but the point is that random, what it allows us to do, it chooses one item from the list. Chooses a random item from the list. Okay. Let's talk a bit more about lists. What should we do next? So our next example will be iterating through lists. Let's try to iterate through list, and here's what I want. So this will be iterating over a list. And let's say I have list or students in comp 150, and I would like to create a list of students. So maybe I have Clark Kent here and Tony Stark and Diana Prince and maybe Bruce Wayne. So these are the students in my class. And I can print the entire list of students. So I can just print students in comp 150. And it will simply print me those. Okay. I can also print the students one by one. So how do I print the students one by one? We already saw it. For name in, right, so I declare a variable called name, and it will go over each of the students here. So Clark Kent and Tony Stark and Diana Prince and Bruce Wayne. All right, print name. And again, remember the indentation. And it will print the students one by one. Okay, so previously it printed the students as the entire list, then it printed one by one. You know what, let me put a /n here. This way, when we print it, there will be a one line before we print the next one. Okay, before we print this string. Okay. Here's what I would like to do. I would like to print the students by index. Okay, so what do I mean by index? Let me call by n the length of the list. And I would like to print something like this. I would like to print something like student one is Clark student, or let's student zero, I guess. And and then student 1 is Tony Starr. And so on. So here's how I do that. So that's one more new thing that we're learning. For I in, so now it's not in the list, it will be in the range of n. And I will explain what's range of n. So print student plus I is a student in position I. Okay, let's try to parse it. So let me say what range n roughly, it's not exactly, but is roughly the list 0, 1, 2, 2, up to n minus 1. Okay, so for I in range n, so iterate with I equals 0, 1, 2, 3, up to n minus 1. And then print student. Oh yeah, we should cast I into a string is, and then the name of the student. Okay. Let's try to see how this one works. So printing students by index, it prints exactly as we promised, right? So print student, and then I, and then is, and then the name of the student. So that's another way to iterate over all students. Okay, so one is this one, which is kind of the easier one, just for each name printed. And the second one is slightly more complicated. It says, get the index of the student, but sometimes we want to have the indices. So in this case, well, that's the example that we have. Okay. Let's practice range a bit more. Okay. Testing range. So for testing range, or maybe we'll call it practice. Here is the simplest example. Let's say for I in range 5. So range 5 means the list is roughly 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's what we'll do. We'll simply print. Yeah, maybe as a first example, we'll just print I. Oh, I'm still in the previous one. So it prints 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can think of range as just being the list 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it doesn't include 5. It starts from 0 and doesn't include 5. If I want them to be in the same line, and I want a space between every two numbers, so I'm going to put a space. So there will also be a space after 4, but let's not worry about it. Okay. So range doesn't have to start from 0. It can start from any number up to any other number. For example, if I do range from 3 to 7, it will do 3, 4. Sorry, from 3 up to 7, I write range 3, 8, and it doesn't include 8. Okay, so the second example will be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Our third example for range, it can get more, it doesn't have to be positive, right? The numbers can be also negative. It can be -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, for example, so it will not include 2. Okay. And the last example, it doesn't even have to jump by 1. It can jump, for example, by 2. So it's -3, -1, and then 1, 3, 5, 7 doesn't include 9. And maybe one more example. I don't know, we start with 3 up to -2. Can you guess what this will do? So it will start with 3, and then the increment will be -1. So it will be 2, 1, 0, and then -1. Maybe I'll put -4 here. -2 and -3. Yeah, this is what it will print. Okay. So range is you can think of it as a function that creates an array that has this sequence of numbers, right? So in the base case, just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it doesn't have to start from 0. It can start from anything. Okay, so this is the example about testing about the range. Okay. Let's do, so the goal for today is to practice lists, and I would like to do some more operations on the lists. So I'll create another file. It will be called list operations. And we'll practice list operations. So here's what I would like to do. So I'll have a list of groceries that says called groceries 1. But I'll also have list of groceries, another list. Okay? And maybe I can print the first list, you know. So I can print the first list and I can print the second list. And when I print them, so first list is, yeah, milk, cheese, bread, and the second list is potatoes, apple, and other stuff. Here's what I would like to do. I would like to concatenate the two lists into one. Okay. And I will call the new variable groceries. And how do I concatenate? I simply do groceries 1 plus groceries 2. It simply appends the two lists together. And then the concatenated list is, let me do it inside in one string. Maybe I'll emphasize that it's all groceries. When we run it, so here is the line concatenated to list into one, and all groceries become just this one long list. Okay, so it first contains the first part. So this is the portion of groceries 1, and this is the part of groceries 2. So this is your concatenation. Okay, nice. But let's say I forgot to add rice to the list. So here is how I add rice. I write all groceries. And then there will be a command called append, and then rice. So this adds rice to the end of the list. Let's try. I forgot to add rice. The updated also has rice, right? So previous didn't have rice, and this one also has rice. Mm, and I'm kind of forgetful. I also forgot tomatoes. So I can add it to the end of the list, but maybe I want to add it somewhere in the middle. Maybe together with potatoes, okay? So I will type insert, and I want to add it at index 3, and then tomatoes. Uh, and then I'll write the final list is, so when I added tomatoes at index 3, here's what happened. So before that, it adds tomatoes in position 3. So remember, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? We start counting from 0. And everything else is sort of pushed to the right. Right, so position 3 means it will be put between bread and potatoes. So here's what I have my tomatoes. So this will be adding tomatoes at index 3. That's another manipulation we can do with list. Okay, so given a list, we can append to the end of the list. We can also insert in the middle of the list. Both are possible. Okay. Okay. Let's try one last example. And this example would be sort of kind of putting together everything we did so far. So here's what we're going to write. So the program gets a string from the user and checks if it is a palindrome. So for example, kayak is a palindrome. Right, so palindrome means it's a word that can be, that reads in both directions the same. Or, I don't know, noon is a palindrome. I don't know what else. Rotator. All these are palindromes. Okay. Okay, so let's start. How do we start? Right, so this is what we need to do, right? This is our goal. So here's the first thing we do. Now, first thing is simple, we want to get a string from the user. So let's call it user input. Right, we already remember enter the string. And first thing we'll do, we'll print it will print the input. Let's try. So we enter the string. You see, there's already a small problem because we should remember to put a space. I know, A, B, C, D. Okay, how do we check that it's a palindrome? So here's what I should tell you. A string is really just a list of characters. So characters means letters. this means I can access each letter in the string using, user input in position I. Let's try. So if I want to say the 0th letter is user input in position 0, and maybe user input in position 2 is, we'll write it here. Let's try to practice this. Okay, so I'll write a string, I don't know, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, A, B, 1, 2, 3. So the 0th letter is A, yeah, it's in position 0. And then in index 2, we see a 1, right? So A is the 0th index, B is the first index, and then 1 is the next index. Okay, maybe we'll try again. X5, Y. So the 0th letter is X, and in the second position, it's Y. Okay. So let's comment this out. And so let's take the length of the user input. And we're going to use a for loop. So for I in range n, what do we want? So we want to say if the 0th letter is equal to the last letter, then it's okay. And if they're not equal, we should say, oh, it's not a palindrome, right? So we want to compare every pair of letters, then the 0th to the last one, the first to the one before that, the second to the second before that, and so on. So here is how we're going to do it. We're going to declare is palindrome. So here's what we're doing. Declare a Boolean variable that remembers if the string is a palindrome. And in the beginning, we set the string to be true because, in the beginning, we see nothing wrong, so it's true. So here's what we do in each step. So we say if user input in position, you know what? I don't like the name user input. Let's call it just text. Okay, sorry. Is not equal. So here's how we write not equal to text in position n. Compare the first character to the last, the second to the one before last, and so on. So we want to compare the 0th to the to the index n-1, and we want to compare, right? So compare index 0 to n-1, and compare index 1 to n-2, and so on. So if they're not equal, then what do? We say is palindrome is equal to false. And if they are equal, we do nothing, okay? We don't change it back to true. And in the end, what we say, if is palindrome is equal to true, then we print text is palindrome. And otherwise, we print is not a palindrome. Okay, that's all. So let's try ABCD, not a palindrome. And if I do ABCD CBA, it is a palindrome. So let me also delete this print because we really don't need it. Okay, let's try to debug this, and we'll see how this goes. Let's enter a string. I don't know, x, y, z, a, z, y, x. Okay, so I in the beginning is 0. And which two are we comparing? So we're comparing this x to this x. Oh, yeah, they're equal. So we skip the false thing. So I is 1, so we're comparing this y to that y. They're also equal, so we skip. Then we compare z to z. We also skip. Then we compare a to a, and we skip. Oh, then I becomes 4, which means is this a. We compare it backwards, yeah, to this a. Yeah, that's still true. Then we compare z to z. Then we compare y to y. Then we compare x to x. If it's true, yeah, we set it to be true. If it's false, we set it to be false. But it was true, so it's fine. Oh, yeah. And one small thing here. So the PyCharm seems to complain here. We don't need to write equals true. We can simply ask if is palindrome. So this works for Boolean. So for Booleans, we can simply, we don't need to write equal true. I'll comment this out. So both of these are the same, but we don't need to write equal true. Okay. Let's maybe try one more, but this time it will not be a palindrome. I don't know. I'll enter a something. I don't know. A, B, C, D, A. Okay. So now what's happening here? We'll compare A to A. Yeah, it's true. Then we compare B to D. When we compare B to D, are they the same or not? So I equals 1, which means we compare B to D. Are they the same? No, they're not. So we'll set palindrome to be false. And once it's set to be false, it never goes back to true, right? So the rest just goes and checks, but it's never going back to true. If there is one mistake, then we just stop. Or we don't stop, but you know, we continue, but we don't go back to set is palindrome to true. And then we'll print, yeah, ABCDA is not a palindrome. Okay, so that was kind of a simple example. But I would like to also support different texts. For example, I would like to do the following. So if I write something like ABC DCBA, you know, it's not really a palindrome, but if we remove the spaces, it does become a palindrome. But here it says it doesn't. So here is a way to remove spaces. Let me call this text the original text. And here's what replace does. It says take any space and replace it with nothing. And I'm going to print the text. So I'll write ABC, DC, BA. And after removing spaces, so let me write after removing spaces, text is equal to this is what it's equal to, and now it is a palindrome. Okay, and here is another example. So maybe if I want to write something like ABC, C, B, A, maybe I would also like to remove not only spaces, but also compare lowercase to uppercase. So here is a way to do it. So I'll say text is equal to text.lower. So what lower does, it converts everything into a lowercase. Okay, so now the string becomes a lowercase. Let's try to debug this one to see exactly what's going on. So I'll write something like kayak. So the original text was kayak, and for now text is kayak, but it didn't remove any spaces. And after doing lower, it becomes all lowercase. And when we continue, well, we simply just run it on the new text and not on the original text. Okay, so the original text is whatever the user gave us, but then we replace the spaces and replaced everything with lowercase letters. So it doesn't have to be only spaces. We can replace it with anything. For example, we can replace we can, I don't know, remove, for example, commas or colons and so on. Okay, and then put everything into lowercase. And if that's the example, so there is this famous palindrome apparently. I'm not sure what this means. A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. After cleaning up, this is what we get. And this becomes a palindrome. Okay, so yeah, you can check that. So A in the beginning, A in the end, M in the beginning, and A in the end, and so on. Let's start this for just one more second. So we went with I from 0 up to n-1, but I'm claiming it suffices to go only up to n/2. And the reason for that is that, well, when I 0 or 1 or 2, we're still comparing the first ones to the last ones. But when I becomes more than n/2, we need to go, we're just comparing the same things, but in the different order. So here is how we're going to do it. We're going to import math, and we're going to say, with I, don't go all the way to the end, but go only up to n/2. So remember, import means we import a package math, and math has a function called ceiling. So what ceiling does is it takes a number. So if n was even, then it would be fine. Then it would be just an integer. But if n was odd, we would need to round it up or down. I suppose it's fine also to round it down. But either way, this is what we do. So we only go halfway with i's, halfway, right? Because there's no need to go, right? There is no need to compare n-1 to 0 because it was already compared before. Okay, so we go only halfway. All right. Good. Okay, so these are all the examples we had for today. Let me do present some practice homework for you. So the first assignment for you is write a program that gets two lists of numbers. So you can just write the list, in the beginning of your file, you can write list with numbers. And the program checks if the sum of the first list is equal to the sum of the second list. Okay? So, for example, if list one is 3 and 8, and list two is 4, 1, 1, 5, then both sums are 11, I think. Okay, that's your first task. The second task is write a program that now the user will first say how many number is going to add, and then is going to put in a list of n numbers, of n ints, and the program needs to return the smallest list, the smallest number in the list. Okay, so as a hint, I will write use append. To use the append function to create your list. Okay, so you'll need to use a for loop. And you will need to use append to create your list. Okay. And then the third task is write a program that asks a user to enter two strings and check if one of the strings is the inverse of the other. So for example, we have ABCCA, and here we have ACCBA. So one is the inverse of the other. Okay, so these are your tasks for today, for this week. Please practice those. If you have questions, please send me an email. All right. Thank you all, and see you next week.